Hey folks, how's it going? This is Dustin Smith, and I wanted to start 2025 with an encouraging word about the kingdom of God and how the kingdom of God within the ministry of Jesus, that is, the reign and the rule of God, the redemptive and restorative rule of God, broke into the present within the ministry of Jesus. And the church should be experiencing this redemptive reign, and it has, whether they've acknowledged it or not. And I think it's something that Jesus is wanting to teach us, and something that the gospel writers are trying to portray. And this is something that even those who believe and preach the kingdom of God should come to grasp, because it's one of the key things that Jesus was trying to teach those that had this expectation of the kingdom of God and of the Messiah showing up. So I want to start by looking at some of the messianic expectation, some of the kingdom expectation from the largest prophet of the Old Testament. That, of course, is the prophet Isaiah. So in Isaiah chapter 35, we have this great vision of the kingdom of God. Now, it's not going to use the word kingdom, but it's going to tell of an age of restoration. And it's very clear that creation is being restored. And when we look at the creation that's being restored, it's not just the mountains and the valleys and the deserts. It's also people, because human beings are part of God's creation, and they are just as in need of redemption as the ground was. If you'll recall that in Genesis chapter 3, it's not just that Adam and Eve were cursed, but also the ground was cursed as well. Creation was cursed, which means that if there's going to be redemption of God's creation, it's not just human beings that are going to be redeemed, it's all of God's creation, all of God's world that's going to be restored. And so we could see a good vision of this in Isaiah chapter 35, which is fairly short in comparison to some of the other chapters, but I think it's very interesting to see the sort of imagery that's here and how Jesus deliberately draws upon this in Matthew's gospel. So let me begin Isaiah chapter 35, verse 1. The wilderness and the desert will be glad. Look there at the poetry that's actually taking place there and the personification. And the Araba will rejoice and blossom like the crocus. It will blossom profusely and rejoice with rejoicing and shout of joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it, the majesty of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of Yahweh, the majesty of our God. Encourage the exhausted and strengthen the feeble. Say to those with anxious heart, take courage, fear not, behold, your God will come with vengeance. The recompense of God will come, but he will save you. Then the eyes of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. And the lame will leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute will shout for joy. For waters will break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the Araba. The scorched land will become a pool, and the thirsty springs of water. In the haunt of Jekels, the resting place, its resting place, grass becomes reeds and rushes. And so that's Isaiah 35, verses 1 through 7. So we can see there that we have barren places, deserts, the Araba, the wilderness. They're going to rejoice because they're being restored, and there's going to be vegetation, there's going to be plants, there's going to be reeds, there's going to be water, and this is going to be the time, of course, when God is going to come, and God is going to show up, and he's going to recompense. He's going to come with vengeance, meaning he's going to judge evil. He's going to deal with evil. And at this time, it's very clear, at this time, we see that humanity is going to be restored. All of the defects of humanity are going to be restored at this time, because when creation gets restored, human beings, which are the crowning accomplishment of creation, according to Genesis chapter 1, they too are being restored. So we can see that the eyes of the blind are being restored. The ears of the deaf are being restored. That's verse 5, so keep that in mind. Isaiah 35, verse 5. We'll come back to that later. In verse 6, we have the lame are going to be able to walk. Okay, and the mute are going to be able to talk. Not just talk, but they're going to shout for joy in the same way that the desert is going to shout for joy and rejoice. Clearly, the land is going to become a pool, and it's going to be a thirsty ground for water. Okay, so you can see here that when the kingdom comes, okay, when God decides to judge and to deal with evil, creation is going to be restored, and everything that's wrong with the world and everything that seems to lack any sort of life is going to be restored. It's almost as if the curse that took place in the Garden of Eden in the final verses of Genesis chapter 3 is going to be undone, turning everything back into a Garden of Eden type atmosphere. And this, of course, includes human beings, because human beings were created and purposefully tasked to rule over and to steward God's creation. So again, the restoration of creation that's going to happen in the kingdom is not just the mountains and the valleys and the deserts, it's also human beings as well. So keep this in mind, because when Jesus was preaching the gospel, when Jesus was talking about the kingdom of God and saying that the kingdom of God is at hand, there are many people who thought that Jesus was the Messiah, and they assumed that Jesus is going to come and he's going to bring the kingdom right now, right then and there. You can clearly see this in the triumphal entry. They think that Jesus, the king, is showing up and he's going to deal with evil right then and there. But what Jesus is doing is he is giving a preview of the kingdom. The kingdom is breaking into the present, and the kingdom, of course, is the reign and the rule of God. So an interesting way of seeing this, and you could see this just by doing a word study on kingdom in the New Testament, and you could just take a piece of paper and put present kingdom text on one side of the page and future kingdom text on the other side of the page. And when you go through the New Testament, you'll find that your list of verses will be about equal length, because the New Testament is quite clear that the kingdom is both present in some sense and still future in another sense. It is already, but not yet. So in Matthew's gospel, in Matthew chapter 11, we have John the Baptist, who is a very important figure. He was someone who was preparing the way for Jesus. He was preaching the kingdom of God. He was preaching the gospel. He was a great person. He even baptized Jesus. But John the Baptist gets put into prison. And he starts to wonder, wait a minute, I think that the Messiah is here, and he's supposed to be letting out the righteous people from prison. He's supposed to be dealing with evil. The righteous people are not supposed to be imprisoned. They're supposed to be released. There's supposed to be freedom. There's supposed to be the sense in which the righteous are going to be ruling and reigning, not being ruled over and subjected by evil persons. And so that's the context of this passage in Matthew chapter 11. So in Matthew chapter 11, verse 2, it says, "Now when John was imprisoned, John, while imprisoned, heard the works of Christ, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, 'Are you the expected one, or shall we look for someone else?'" Okay, so John's in prison, again, wondering, when is this kingdom going to show up? Is it you, Jesus? Are you the one that we're looking forward to, or should we expect someone else? And he's kind of wondering this whole thing. Okay, so notice what Jesus does. Notice how Jesus answers this. In verse 4, Jesus answered and said to them, "Go and report to John what you hear and what you see." Okay, the things that you hear and the things that you see. And look what he says in verse 5. "The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them." So in the midst of this passage, Jesus is actually quoting from Isaiah 35, verse 5. That passage that is talking about the time of the future restoration that's going to happen in the kingdom of God. And what Jesus is saying is that in his own ministry, this is already happening right now. It's already happening right now. The restoration of creation is already happening in a small sense, but in a demonstrable, visible, tangible way. Things that people can hear about, and they can also see with their own eyes. So people are being restored, and what this does is it indicates that the miracles of Jesus are not just some sort of mundane, mere healings here and there, cleansing the lepers and giving sight to the blind. They're actually kingdom miracles. They are miracles that are showing how the kingdom of God has broken into the present, because the people that are healed are demonstrating and experiencing the rule and the reign of God. They are becoming the restored people that the kingdom had predicted through the prophets of the Old Testament, like we saw in Isaiah chapter 35. So this is really important because Jesus is trying to show John, who is a primary preacher of the kingdom, that the kingdom has broken into the present with what Jesus is doing. And of course, John should not lose hope in the fact that Jesus is the expected one, the one who is coming. That, of course, is the Messianic anointed King of Israel. Now, why does this matter? Why does it matter for Christians today in 2025? I'm, of course, publishing this at the tail end of 2024, but I think when it goes into a new year, people typically are thinking about New Year's resolutions and what can they do. And resolutions in a new year, we typically think of new year, new me. As in, okay, I got a new year. I'm going to start to do some things right. I'm going to start to do some things better. And I think one of the key things that we can do as kingdom citizens, as people that have believed in the message of the kingdom and who hope for the kingdom, and those that experience the kingdom right now, is to recognize that, you know what, there should be restoration in our lives already. There should be restoration in our lives already. In fact, when Jesus preached on the parable of the sower, there are 4 different soils, referring to 4 different types of people that respond to the gospel. And the 4th soil is the only one that actually makes it. But the one who receives it is the one who hears the message of the kingdom. They understand it, and then they begin to bear fruit. And the amount of fruit that they bear is indicative of the fact that there is restoration and the reign of God taking place in the present already. I mean, 30-fold, 60-fold, or 100-fold. I mean, you have, if you take $1 and you're able to multiply it 30 times, that is a massive return on your investment. And I think that's what Christ is expecting of us. He's expecting of his kingdom people while he's awaiting in heaven until he can come back and consummate the kingdom completely, to bring about the kingdom in its fullest sense. He's looking at his kingdom people to see, are they going to bear fruit? Are they going to prove that they have actually believed in this message of the kingdom by bearing fruit, by bearing lots and lots of fruit, by showing that the kingdom of God, in which they have placed their faith and their hope, is something that is actually manifesting through redemption and through restoration in their lives on an everyday basis. And so I think what we need to do if we're making New Year's resolutions is that we need to say, okay, I'm a kingdom person. Yes, the kingdom is going to be fully consummated when Jesus returns, but something is supposed to be taking place right now. And Jesus taught about this. He demonstrated it, and his miracles proved this. His parables talked about it. Nearly every other parable is something he's trying to teach to John the Baptist. It's a common teaching in the New Testament. How can I be a new creation person today? How can I be a kingdom person right now? How can I be someone who demonstrates the reign and the rule of God already in my life right now, proving that my faith is legitimate, it is real, and it's something that is tangible in a way that's going to keep me on the straight and narrow as I'm looking forward to the return of Jesus. And remember, when Jesus returns, he's going to look at his disciples and say, okay, who is the one who has been faithful? Who is the one that I'm going to say, well done, good and faithful servant? He's looking for faithfulness. And the faithfulness implies that he has given us a task. He's given us some responsibilities, and he wants to see, are we being loyal to that? And I think the key thing that Jesus has given to his people is his message of the kingdom of God, his message of the reign and the rule of God, the kingdom of heaven. And so if you are someone that is looking for a New Year's resolution, my encouragement to you is to meditate on the kingdom of God and ask yourself, how can I demonstrate restoration in my life right now? How can I show the rule of God, the reign of God, and restoration in my household, in my relationship with my spouse, in my relationship with my children, in my relationship with my coworkers at work, with my neighbors? How can I show that there is restoration in those relationships? You could start with those things. If you have broken relationships, work on restoring them. Work on bringing about the restoration that the kingdom is going to bring to all of creation already in the present. And that's what Jesus was doing in his ministry, is that he was restoring relationships. He was restoring people. He was restoring their broken body parts. He was restoring people's relationship with God. He was demonstrating the restoration of the kingdom in the present to give people this hope, this taste, this preview, so they can long for something that's going to happen on a worldwide scale when he returns. And I think when we start to show these deeds of the kingdom, these acts of the kingdom that are proving that restoration is taking place right now by doing good works and bearing fruit 30-fold, 60-fold, or 100-fold, people are going to start to notice. People are going to start to pay attention. And they're going to start to see that, and they're going to start to ask questions. Hey, why is it different with you? Why are you showing this sense of wholeness and that you have your life together, and it gives you there an opportunity to tell them about the kingdom of God? And that's also what we see in the ministry of Jesus, that Jesus would be doing all of these things, these miracles of the kingdom, these parables of the kingdom, and these acts of restoration, and people would say, why is Jesus doing this? And that would give them an opportunity to hear the message of the kingdom. So as a New Year's resolution, I would encourage you to focus on bearing the fruit that would prove that you are a kingdom citizen. Bear fruit, proving that the reign and the rule of God is something that is going to be manifesting in your own life by showing restoration in your relationships with other people, in your relationship with God, and in the sort of new creation people that God has called us to be in anticipation for the fullness of new creation, including the resurrection of the dead and the restoration of the entire world. So hopefully that's given you something to consider and to encourage you with. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Have a great new year. My name is Dustin Smith signing off. I will see you in 2025. Peace.